In case you haven't discovered it yet, ChatGPT is the AI chatbot released by OpenAI in November 2022. In this video, I'm going to be using it to help me make a language. Now, I haven't done much of it yet on this channel, but I have a fair bit of experience in language design, or conlanging as it's known to those of us who practice it. So I wondered, can AI help me make a conlang? And if so, how valuable could it be to conlangers? There are likely a million ways I could go about this, but I decided to ask its help on one of the areas I find hardest: idea generation. Can AI give me the initial prompts to inspire me to create something wonderful and new? Well, when I asked it for prompts, what it gave back wasn't ideal. It seemed just to be giving me beginner's conlanging advice. Among its exciting and revolutionary ideas were to choose a word order, add words, and choose the language's sounds. So I went back to the drawing board. I tried several variations of my original prompt, again and again, until finally it got the idea. It wasn't doing exactly as I'd asked, but the output seemed to be workable. Now, in the interests of transparency, I didn't take the first set of prompts it gave me. I knew I was making a video and that I'd need to be able to pronounce this language, so I made it regenerate a few times until I got something I liked. That's one of the advantages of this. If you want a challenge, you can just accept the first output, but if you're picky like me, you can generate as many as you want until you find something you like. So let's take a look at the final set and see what we think. Exclude any diphthongs or vowel sequences. Introduce a series of ejective fricatives. Include a rare consonantal feature, such as a voiceless lateral fricative or a voiced bilabial trill. Incorporate a vowel system with phonemic nasal vowels. Introduce a complex syllable structure, allowing for consonant clusters and intricate onset and coda combinations. Develop a language with an active-stative alignment, where verbs vary their alignment based on semantic factors. Create a system of verb serialization, allowing multiple verbs to combine into a single complex predicate. Introduce a grammatical feature for expressing reciprocity or mutual action between participants. Include a morphological feature to mark degree or intensity of actions or qualities. Incorporate a system of nominal classifiers to categorize and classify nouns based on their inherent characteristics. Include words for unique geological formations, like fjords, sinkholes, or mesas. Enrich the vocabulary with terms related to a specific cultural practice or tradition, such as tea ceremonies, mask making, or kite flying. Incorporate words for complex emotions or psychological states that are difficult to express in other languages. Introduce a set of colour terms that include culturally significant hues or shades. Include words related to architectural styles, traditional dwellings, or iconic landmarks. Design a conlang spoken by a society with a strong emphasis on communal living, cooperation, and shared resources. Include specific words or expressions that reflect community values, egalitarianism, and social harmony. Embed cultural practices and beliefs into the language, such as ancestor worship, nature reverence, or spirit communication. Develop vocabulary related to sustainable agriculture, permaculture, or traditional ecological knowledge. Incorporate terms for storytelling, oral traditions, or folklore that are integral to the cultural heritage. include a system of honorifics or formal registers to denote social status, age, or professional hierarchy. Develop a repertoire of idiomatic expressions or figurative language unique to the conlang's culture. Incorporate a linguistic feature for expressing indirect requests, suggestions, or hints. Introduce a specific speech register or style for expressing gratitude, appreciation, or admiration. Alright, so without further ado I present to you the Xvan language. Xvan is the language of the Xvan people, who live in the lowland steppes by the mountains. They're farmers, growing crops such as barley, rye, peas and apples. They keep livestock, mainly goats, but also occasionally go hunting for larger animals, including wild cattle, horses and pigs. They catch fish from the rivers and forage for edible and medicinal plants. They have a sedentary lifestyle, living in houses made of wood and mud bricks, although also ride horses and often travel great distances to trade with neighbouring peoples. Among these peoples, they're known for their peaceful and cooperative ways and their great skill in pottery. Their oral tradition and mythology is very important to them, with storytellers and oral historians being very well respected members of their communities. They worship their deceased ancestors and believe that the spirits of the dead mingle freely among the rivers and trees. Their language is quite distinct from those around them, and real-world linguists would consider it an isolate, although it has been affected by aerial features and taken several loanwords from its neighbours. Xvan has 39 phonemes, 32 consonants and 7 vowels. There are voiced, voiceless and ejective series of obstruents and syllabic sonorants. The consonants are m, n, l, y, m, n, l, p, t, ch, k, ch, k, b, d, j, g, s, sh, sh, h, ts, sh, q, v, z, y, j, g. The voiceless velar fricatives are in free variation with uvulars, and there exists a process of final devoicing, although almost all cases where a word would show voiced-voiceless alternation when suffixed have been levelled, except for a few select examples. There are 5 oral vowels: e, u, e, or, a. There are also 2 nasal vowels, and a. The language does not have any diphthongs, and vowels cannot exist in hiatus, except at word boundaries. This means that every syllable contains exactly 1 vowel and begins with a consonant, except word initially. While the language isn't written by its speakers, in my romanization, all phonemes are transcribed the same as their IPA symbols, except for those shown on screen. These are mainly changes to the palatal consonants, but also the voiced lateral fricative and an aesthetic change for the syllabic sonorants. The syllable structure can get quite complex. While most syllables are fairly simple, containing only 1 or 2 onset consonants and 0 or 1 in the coda, some words can get quite complicated, with up to 4 in the onset and 2 in the coda. However, no words exist with a full template, and syllable final clusters are relatively rare, occurring only in loan words and a few native words. Many younger speakers remove them entirely by adding an epenthetic vowel to the end of the word. When inflected, a word will never allow creation of a new final cluster, so suffixes often have forms for both consonant and vowel final stems. Xvan nouns inflect for case. There are three cases: nominative, absolutive, and possessive locative. The case suffixes have different forms for stems ending in a vowel and those ending in a consonant. The language has an active stative alignment, so the nominative case is used for the subject of a transitive verb and an active intransitive verb, and the absolutive for the object of a transitive verb and the experiencer of a stative intransitive verb. The possessive locative is a single case form used for both possessive and locative functions. It isn't a genitive or a dative case because it doesn't have the more general connotations of these terms, although it does have several additional uses beyond its core functions. Nouns do not inflect to show number. This means that any noun could be either singular or plural, and the interpretation of this is down to context and any other elements in the sentence. All nouns in Xvan have one or more classifiers. These are associated words which qualify the main noun. This is similar to the behaviour of blade in English, as in blade of grass. In English, grass demands use of the associated word blade in order to be counted or individually specified. This is pretty much how it works in Xvan, with every noun, not just mass nouns as in English, taking a complementary word, which is used with numbers, determiners, and in a few other contexts. Which classifier is used is often dependent on semantic factors, so for example cat uses the classifier for four-legged animals, and mountain uses the classifier for very large natural objects, such as mountains and clouds. Nouns can be either definite or indefinite in their base forms, and this is how they usually appear. However, there is also a definite article, which can be added to nouns to mark them specifically as definite. With a noun beginning with a consonant, the article is o, but this is dropped when the stem begins with a vowel, meaning that only consonant initial words can explicitly show definiteness. The article isn't as common as it is in English, and is up to the discretion of the speaker to include, although there are a number of situations where the article is mandatory if the noun can show it. The main four of these situations are with proper nouns except personal names, on a possessed noun, with job titles and occupations, and with the names of the seasons. New nouns can be derived with a variety of suffixes, which can be added to both nouns and other parts of speech. Noun compounding exists, but it isn't particularly common, and it's almost completely unproductive, with most compounds conventionalized and having been formed at an earlier stage of the language. Adjectives also inflect for case, agreeing with their head nouns in all situations. However, regular adjectives will always end in I, and this carries over to the case suffixes, giving a slightly different set of endings to those used with nouns. A comparative construction exists, although there's no superlative. This is formed with a locative construction, where the standard of the phrase is put into the locative case, and the comparee is usually in the absolutive. It's worth noting that Xvan doesn't have a copula, so the adjective in question is just placed at the end of the sentence without a verb. There's also a prefix, which can be added to both adjectives and verbs with an intensifying meaning. On adjectives it means very, while on verbs it can either be intensive, doing the action particularly strongly, or completive, doing the action fully. Xvan has 4 personal pronouns, each inflecting irregularly for case. These are the only parts of the language which regularly show number. There are only first and second person pronouns, with the role of third person pronouns being taken by demonstratives. They inflect for all 3 cases, but additionally each have an extra form, a possessive adjective. These are adjectives in all senses, and therefore inflect as adjectives, using the regular adjective endings. Unlike in English, demonstratives show a three-way distinction instead of two, with the proximal, distal, and an additional, very distal as I've called it, which is used for objects significantly displaced in either space or time. These demonstratives are irregular in their inflection, as the personal pronouns are. There are also demonstratives defining place and time, which decline regularly. There are 6 interrogative pronouns. Among these are moda, meaning how or how much, and ven, which in addition to acting as standalone pronouns, are able to modify nouns. When this is done, a classifier is required, and the pronoun doesn't change itself to agree. There are 5 slots for suffixes on a verb stem. These are the voice, the negative, the tense aspect mood, and the agent and patient marking. We'll go through these in reverse order, starting with agent and patient marking. The agent and patient are both marked on the verb, and one or the other occurs on intransitive verbs, depending on whether it's an active or stative verb. These suffixes show person and number of the subject and object, and have different forms depending on the surrounding sounds and where they occur in the word. The tam suffixes mark aspect and mood. There's no overt tense marking in the language, although certain forms may be more commonly used in reference to different time frames. The aspects are the perfective, used for whole events, and the habitual, used for actions which happen often within a given time frame. There are also 4 moods: the indicative, the conditional, the imperative, and the potential. The potential is used for actions deemed likely or possible by the speaker, although the actual usage is quite broad, and it can be used in several unconventional ways. The imperative suffix is able to replace the vowels of other suffixes or of the verb stem, which is quite rare in the language. No overt subject is used with the imperative, although it still takes person marking. The conditional and potential moods are often used in request making, to make a question, request, or suggestion more polite. The negative suffix is m, occupying the second slot. In addition to this suffix, an adverb ban must always accompany the verb, except in imperatives where it's dropped. Finally, we have the voice suffixes. There are 5 voices: active, passive, reciprocal, causative, and causative reciprocal. The marking of most of these varies between the 3 types of verb, although the passive and reciprocal may only occur on transitive verbs. In a passive construction, the previous subject is deleted and the previous object becomes the new subject. However, because this new verb is invariably being done to the new subject by the deleted party, the new subject will remain in the absolutive case it was in before. Speakers can, of course, choose to include the old subject, and in this case it occurs in the locative possessive case. One very interesting feature of Xvan verbs is that of serialization. In a serial verb construction, verbs can be chained together, usually without any linking or intervening elements. This is used when multiple verbs describe the same action or event. All verbs must always mark the same categories. So for example, if one is passive, all others must be passive as well. Sometimes the meanings of the verbs combine in obvious ways, while in others it's less predictable to non-natives, and some forms may even be conventionalized. Usually the more dynamic, active or salient verb occurs second in the sequence, while the first verb contributes less to the overall meaning, although this isn't always the case. Numerals in Xvan are base 20 instead of the 10 of English, meaning that you have to count to 20 before falling back down to 1. The language uses a subbase of 5, however, so until 20 is reached, speakers count up to 5 4 times. This system has been slightly eroded with time, with the numbers 15 to 19 using an irregular prefixing form of the number 3. Using only these numbers you can count up to 400 before requiring additional words. Above 20, the proclitic lu is used to connect the 20s to the units. While this system may look quite messy and complex, it's actually very simple, and allows for speakers to count very high using very few words and very regular combining rules. For instance, 58 is expressed as 2 20s and 18, while 134 is expressed as 6 20s and 14. In English we have prepositions, which come before their head noun. In Xvan, there are postpositions, which come after. Xvan postpositions come in two main categories, locational and non-locational. This is determined by the meaning, and affects which noun case they're used with. Locational postpositions are used with the locative case, while non-locational ones are used with the absolutive. There's quite a bit of freedom as to where they can be placed. Most commonly they occur after the arguments, in the same position as a locative noun, but if this leads to confusion with multiple absolutive nouns, it can move to places further forwards in the sentence. The basic word order is SOV. Locative phrases come between the object and the verb, which distinguishes them from possessive phrases, which occur before the head noun as all modifiers do. Likewise, adverbs come directly before verbs. Relative clauses in the language are what's known as adjoined. This means that the relative clause occurs side by side with the main clause, instead of nesting inside of it. The relative clause comes before the main clause, and is defined by the relative pronoun, which modifies the noun in question. That noun is then restated in the main clause, with addition of a demonstrative pronoun. Because of how long this construction is, it's slightly less common in colloquial speech, and is reserved mainly for more formal registers. The language has 5 main registers. These are the colloquial register, the age honorific register, the appreciative register, the religious register, and the children's register. These represent different styles of language usage, depending on the situation, rather than any specific feature of the language. The colloquial register is the style of everyday speech. It correlates approximately to the form shown already in this video, however has a few distinct differences. For example, loanwords are more common in this register than any other, although the source language of these words depends on the region of the speaker, leading to slight dialectal variation. The lu used in numbers is often elided in this register, and the negative adverb ban sees a lot more use, both in non-standard imperative constructions and more generally where it's become a negative particle like English no. The age honorific register is used for addressing people older than you, usually elderly people, but also anyone notably older. It's fairly similar to both the appreciative and religious registers in its higher formality and subsequent vocab use. One of its particularities, however, is the avoidance of personal pronouns. Instead, speakers will use titles, names, relationship words, and the passive voice to convey their meaning. There's also an honorific prefix, which can be added to nouns at the speaker's discretion. This prefix is rare outside the honorific register, except in mocking language, or to refer to an elder person in another formal register. Common to the three more formal registers is also the use of longer and more complex constructions, even for things which would otherwise be very short in colloquial speech. The appreciative register is used for expressing appreciation and gratitude, and has the effect of humbling the speaker. Like the age honorific register, it uses more formal vocab and longer constructions, but also has a system of avoidance speech. When this is used, the names of certain objects can't be mentioned. These are usually the objects the speaker is appreciative of, but can also include things deemed unsavoury to discuss. Instead of using the normal words for these items, some things have special avoidance forms, while for others, speakers rely on euphemism, metaphor, and descriptive terms. Different moods are common in this register, particularly the conditional and potential, which are used to make requests and statements less direct. Like the honorific register, pronouns are also often avoided, though to a much lesser degree. Usually this is restricted to the first person singular, and even then isn't adhered to at all times. A non-linguistic feature of this register is that speakers will avoid eye contact with the addressee. The religious register is used for addressing spirits and deceased ancestors, and takes the avoidance speech of the appreciative register to another level. There's a lot of taboo in Xvan religion, so many common words and expressions have avoidance terms specifically for this register. A few of these are even different to the terms of the appreciative register. Religious speech uses the lowest proportion of loan words in the language, often even avoiding those that are in standard use. In their place, it will either preserve otherwise lost native terms, or use an avoidance strategy. Due to the ritualistic nature of this register, a number of set phrases are used, often with very unusual grammar that's been fossilised from an earlier stage of the language. The final register is the one used in speaking with young children. This shares many similarities with child-directed speech in other languages, such as higher pitch and use of diminutives. In Xvan, the favoured diminutive in this register is t, which can sometimes even replace or be added onto other diminutive affixes. Reduplication is also common, as well as onomatopoeia. In addition to being used when speaking with children, this register can be used with adults where it has an insulting, derogatory tone. Now, this video is getting quite long, so rather than going through all the vocab, idioms and expressions, I'll scroll through them on screen while I discuss my thoughts on this project and on using AI as a conlanger. So I chose to use ChatGPT here to form my idea generation process. You could no doubt use it for almost any other part of the conlanging process, but I thought this would allow the most room for my own creativity. It did take a little while to get a prompt of the right format and level, and I could have continued to refine it, but eventually I came to the point that it was good enough. AI technology is advancing so rapidly at the moment that maybe in a few months it'll be able to create ever better lists of prompts, but for the moment it certainly can be a little pernickety and takes a little initial work to get right. Overall, I'd say I'm quite pleased with what I made. I hoped that randomly generating the criteria for my language would lead to interesting combinations of features and innovative problem solving. Certainly I got that, although I did struggle to get it to generate any particularly obscure language features. A couple of the ideas did seem to play off each other quite nicely, but others seemed to clash a little. For example, I struggled with including both verb serialization and an active state of alignment, and at first the combination of honorifics and a very egalitarian society perplexed me a little, but I think I managed to work around them all right in the end. A lot of prompts I ended up with were actually about what vocabulary I should include, which for a longer project would probably be great, but since I was on a time limit, I came to the end and just had so many words to create. While for the purposes of the video and of completeness I tried to do as much as I could, I didn't end up making all the vocab in the original prompts. I think one of the great things about this method is that you can do as little or as much as you'd like, and were I doing this project for myself, I would probably have left out a few points, because a few times it felt like the AI just wanted to get the 5 points per section, regardless of quality. I think it's also worth mentioning that ChatGPT isn't the only AI I've used for this project. When I was discussing the society and culture at the start of the video, I showed some pictures made by an image creation AI. Just last year, if I'd wanted accompanying pictures, I'd have had to rely on real pre-existing ones. But now I can describe exactly what I need and get that, even if that picture has never existed before. I've done videos in the past where I've needed images, such as my 8 Reasons to Learn a Language one, so I can tell you how hard it can be to get exactly what you need, especially on a budget. Getting images like that isn't just helpful as a content creator. As a conlanger, it allowed me to visualize the people who would speak my language and really understand what their life would be like. Since language and culture are so inextricably linked, I felt just having those few images was immensely helpful for my process and my motivation. So without rambling on too much more, I think it's safe to say that this technology is exciting. It has a lot of promise for all sorts of disciplines, although at present it can be a little bit fiddly to get set up. There is obviously a lot of worry around it too, and for good reason I think. It's easy to see how those images I used could take work from artists, or how ChatGPT could be used for less innocent purposes. I think it can upgrade people's workflows in so many different ways, and allow even greater creativity and innovation than we could do before, but I think we do need to be careful with it. So, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I put an awful lot of work into this one, and until next time, as the Xvan would say, Shush dvan noshuzi hlajasta.